So my name is Jeremy Wright, and I'm here with David Phillips from BBM Analytics. And only because I made this mistake earlier today, for those who are watching, do you want to give us you're not from BBM, you're from BBM Analytics, and you love...
Sure. Smoothly in. Now, so there's two companies, BBM Canada, and BBM Canada is the not-for-profit that does all the audience actual data. And then what we do, we're off to the side as a for-profit, and we basically help people make sense of that. So we have a suite of software tools, and we have different data that help people make sense of their audiences, which is our line.
So are you a radio guy? Are you an analytics guy?
No, well, I guess my background is primarily media, probably, and media and data. So like, I came here from the UK 10 years ago, and my background, I started off in media sales, selling ad space to car dealers, which was joyful.
Yeah,
and then
very fun.
Fantastic, yeah. And then I learned a lot about what people can be like, and then ended up working for essentially a data supplier. So I've always been around working with clients who use data in media, and then analytics we've been around for 7 years, and that's radio, TV, and media agencies. But it's all around helping them use data in service of media.
So I mean, from a data standpoint, is the ideal world to not ignore the demographic stuff, but to get closer to individual users around like interest and intent? Is that kind of where you're hoping things go in the next, call it 10 years?
I think. Well, to take one step back from that, I think that one mistake that I always see on kind of panels and discussions like this is assuming that we're going to have an either-or situation. So in other words, if we move towards more individualized buying or more individualized targeting, you have to do that exclusively at the expense of demographic targeting. And I think it depends what you're trying to do.
Objective first.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, but yes, I think the trend has to be towards getting closer to the person. But the other thing that's going on, I think, is that we often tend to misdefine the problem. So when we look at people trading on adults turn 554 or whatever, we think that's because that's what they believe to be the best way of doing it from understanding the audience point of view, which I think is false. I think the reason why people do it is because the problem is, how do you make that transaction quick?
Yes.
So programmatic is interesting from my point of view because it's the best way of getting to an agreed value.
Or you're not talking about speed of transaction, you're talking about value of data.
Well, yeah, it's speed of getting to an agreed value. So without sounding too wanky about the whole thing, but like I think the reason why you've got 4 demographic groups is because it enables people to get buyers and sellers to get to an agreed value really quickly. Whereas and so if you go beyond that, if you make that a more refined target, you can't get to that agreed value quickly.
It becomes very dynamic very quickly.
Yeah, so if you're still doing it human to human, I'm saying yes. Well, I want to buy people who have caravans and have housewives for kids. Then it's not that you couldn't get to an agreed value, but it's going to take you a long time. And if media agencies are operating at 2% margin, they're not going to take that time.
So, I mean, it's one of the conversations kind of been happening in the hallways a little bit today is around kind of, the connected car stuff, the future of radio, the next big thing. I mean, how much for you, when you guys have a lot of data on hand, how much for you is the next big thing an opportunity, and how much is it a threat?
Well, I think that partly goes back to the thing I was talking about earlier about we tend to flip to binary thinking too quickly. So it's either one or the other. And I think, I do think that what I would love to see more evidence of, and it could be that it's going on, I just don't see it, is not quite moonshot thinking, but kind of exploratory thinking with a less emphasis on return on investment against it. So if you look at media that are growing, or media which the corporate overlords believe has a future. So TV is one. You see a lot of money spent on things that you imagine the business case for it was fairly hopeful. It's kind of like, and we reckon it could do this, but it's not going to be that pinned down. And there may be this going on in radio. I just don't see it. But there doesn't seem to be a whole bunch of kind of speculative R&D. So one way of answering that question is I hope radio is building that future for itself. In terms of, the car's obviously a big area, and I think that obviously we were involved in a thing called Radio Player, which is a possible solution to that, where you have a single point of contact. I think it's absolutely true that if there's no aggregation, then it's going to be extremely long hill to walk, and if there is aggregation, it's going to be a lot easier. So, if they can, and there were a lot of conversations today about separating the distribution from the content and thinking about the two together. Chris Gordon said something interesting. He said, the way I evaluate a brand is, could it stand on its own without licensing the transmitter? And I think the more there's that sort of thinking, and there's investment in R&D and things like that, I think there's a lot of possibilities, and there'll probably be both and as opposed to either or. I don't think one thing's going to win. I think a bunch of different things put together will.